Hello friends, welcoming you all back to GR's Potential Builder Current Affairs Prince Program Session 4. So these are the topics which we are going to discuss today. So as usual in the description, we are going to provide with our Telegram channel where every day we are posting exam related updates as well as few questions. So for regular follow-up regarding exam as well as quick revisions, follow us on our YouTube channel as well as our Telegram channel. This is the contact number of the institute where you can call for exam related queries. So please feel free to give your suggestions if we need to make any changes to the contents. So let's go into the topic without any further delay. So the first topic which we are going to discuss today is regarding 6th Indo-Japan Samvad Conference. So actually, this is a series of dialogue which is held annually between India and Japan. Here, in this conference, the leaders, political personalities, academicians exchange their views on conflict avoidance, that is, the global conflicts, how they can come out of it and those things, as well as environmental issues through a series of dialogues which are held annually. So the first conference was held in the year 2015 in New Delhi and Bodh Gaya, that is in Bihar. So the conference which held recently, Prime Minister of India would have proposed that he will be creating a library where Buddhist text. So it's kind of a Buddhist library where Buddhist text of different regions or different countries from different countries will be stored. So it becomes like a repository of Buddhist texts, and they will also enable the conversion of or translation of these texts. So this will be freely available to monks and Buddhist scholars through which they can go through, examine, and they can bring some changes into the modern world. And they can also give ideas for the contemporary challenges which we face today. So these texts will be stored in digital formats. So they will be stored as digital texts. So this is the basics regarding this conference. And this conference is hosted by Nikki Inc. of Japan and Vivekananda International Foundation, which we'll be seeing today. So this is for creation of library of all Buddhist literatures and texts. In a short while, we will see few Buddhist literatures. Those are important from exam point of view. So coming to Buddhism, Japan is a country which has third largest Buddhist population. Though Buddhism originated in India, but the share of Buddhism in India is around 0.7% of the population right now. So the largest concentration of Buddhists are in Maharashtra as of now. So after the arrival of Islam in the 12th century, Buddhism declined in India. So these are few facts regarding Buddhism in India. So coming to Japan, it is the third largest country which has Buddhist population, and inside the country, Buddhism is the second most popular religion after Shintoism. Shintoism is a religion which originated in Japan. So after this, Buddhism is the second popular religion. So coming to Vivekananda International Foundation, it was established in the year 2009 in New Delhi. It's a independent and non-partisan organization which works in major quality researches and in-depth studies. So this organization is for this. So let's see few important topics that are in related to Buddhism that are important for exam. So first let's see about the birth, death and other events of Buddha first. So these are the associated symbols of Buddha with his life. These are the associated symbols. So first thing is regarding his birth. So Buddha was born in Lumbini Gardens. Lumbini Gardens near Kapilavastu, which is in Nepal. So that is related to lotus, as well as another symbol is of bull. Second is Maha Binishkramana. So Maha Binishkramana is regarding the renunciation. Like he gives away all his pleasures, worldly pleasures, and he goes for getting that enlightenment. So that is represented by horse. So next comes the enlightenment, where he sits in front of sits underneath a bodhi tree, where he gets enlightened. So that is represented by a bodhi tree. Next comes the Dharma Chakra Pravartana, or first sermon, where he meets his disciples or where he gives his first speech. That is represented by Veer. It happened in Sarnath. So the first sermon was held in Sarnath. Next comes Mahaparinirvana. So Mahaparinirvana is death of Buddha. So that is represented by a stupa. He died in Kushinagar. So these are few facts about Buddha, and regarding how Buddhism spread and those things, those were related to the text that was created by the Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are basically people who are at the stage of enlightenment. They actually can reach enlightenment, but the thing is they work for others to get enlightened. So that is the thing of Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas, monks, bhikshus, these are the people who were helpful in spread of Buddhism. Then another one was the great kings. For example, Ashoka, he was the one who was responsible for spread of Buddhism to Sri Lanka, basically, and to places like Cambodia and those areas. He was a ardent follower of Buddhism. Through his son and daughter, he was responsible for spreading Buddhism to Sri Lanka and other countries. So let's go see few things about the Buddhist Council. There were totally 4 Buddhist councils that is important to us from the exam point of view. The first Buddhist council held in Rajgarh. This was immediately after the death of Buddha. This was done by Ajatashatru, the king. He is the Magadhan Empire. So it happened in 400 BC. He belongs to Magadhan Empire dynasty. Magadhan dynasty. And the presidency was held by Mahakashyapa. So this was immediately after the death of Buddha. So next comes the second Buddhist council, which held in Vaishali 383 BC. This was patronized by a king called Kalosaka, who belonged to Sasisunga dynasty, and its presidency was by Sabakami. And next comes the third Buddhist council, which was held in Pataliputra. This was done by Ashoka, the great king of Mauryan Empire. So he was the son of Chandragupta Maurya, who was ardent follower of Jainism. So Chandragupta was a follower of Jainism, Chandragupta Maurya, and Ashoka Buddhist tradition. So this was preceded by Mogaliputta Tissa and Abhidhamma Pitakas, that is the Tripitakas, which are the Buddhist texts. That was completely done during this period, and the Buddhist texts were compiled together in the third Buddhist council. Next is the fourth Buddhist council, which happened in Kashmir, and it was patronized under the king Kanishka. He belongs to Vasumitra. This was presided by Vasumitra, and here Buddhism was divided into Mahayana and Hinayana type of Buddhism. Coming back to Kanishka, Kanishka was a king of Kushan dynasty, and he founded the Shaka era, Kushan dynasty, and he founded the Saka era. So he regarded 78 AD as the Saka era. So these are few important Buddhist council which are much important in terms of prelims examination. So now let's see the different divisions of Buddhism. Majorly, Buddhism is divided into Mahayana and Hinayana at a larger scale. Mahayana Buddhism and Hinayana Buddhism. Hinayana was the Buddhism which was taught by Buddha, and this was followed by Ashoka. Mahayana is a type of Buddhism which says that as the time passes, as the time changes, then we need to change our pattern of worship and those things. So Mahayana preached idol worship and those things, which was absent in Hinayana. So During the fourth Buddhist council, Buddhism was divided into Hinayana and Mahayana. So another school of Buddhism is Theravadins. Theravadin is also oldest school of Buddhism, and this has closest resemblance with Hinayana tradition. So another one is Vajrayans. So basically Theravadins are in Sri Lanka, Cambodia and those regions. So next is Vajrayana type of Buddhism. This is called as the vehicle of thunderbolt. Vajrayana is vehicle of thunderbolt. This is based on the tantric practices, and here the rituals are bit complex compared to other types of Buddhism. So this features tantric practices. The Mahayana school of Buddhism is called as great vehicle, and Hinayana is known as the lesser vehicle in terms of Buddhism. So this is the great and this is the lesser vehicle. So these are some of the differences, and Tibetan school of Buddhism is another one where it is Mahayana teachings, is resemblance Mahayana teaching. Another one type of Buddhism which flourished in China, which majorly concentrates on emphasis on meditation, is Zen Buddhism. This majorly emphasis on meditation. So let's see few texts or important Buddhist texts related to Buddhism. So the first comes the Tripitakas, which was compiled in the third Buddhist council. So the first one is Sutta Pitaka. There are many other divisions inside these three, but the major outputs are these. So Sutta Pitaka, which talks about Buddha and his close associates. Next comes the Vinaya Pitaka, which gives the discipline, that is rules and traditions of monks and monasteries. So it's a book of discipline. For monks and monastery, it's the rule book. And then comes the Abhidhamma Pitaka, which deals with philosophy and doctrine of Buddhism that Buddha preached, like the Dhamma and those things. So coming to the next one, Jatakas, which are stories of the previous birth of Buddha. These are basically in poetic form. Next are Dipavamsa and Mahavamsa. These two are Sri Lankan chronicles through which we came to know that Ashoka was responsible for spread of Buddhism in Sri Lanka. So these two chronicles are basically in Pali text. So next comes Milinda Panho. This is book by Menander, a great Greek king. So this is the questions that Menander or Milinda asked to a Buddhist monk called Nagasena. To Nagasena, he was asking questions and he was getting to know about Buddhism. So this is by a Greek king, Menander or Milinda. Questions. Next comes Buddha Charita by Ashwagosha. This also deals with the life of Buddha. It's basically written in Sanskrit. So these are few informations about Buddhism. Buddhism is an important topic, Buddhism and Jainism. So please have a close look at these topics, because few questions like Maitreya and all were asked, who forms the future, who happens to be the future Buddha. So these kinds of questions were there, and few questions about this Vajrapani and those things were asked in prelims, like where the idols were there, like related to Ajanta and Ajanta caves and those things. So Buddhism is a very important topic in terms of Buddhism and Jainism both. At least one question is coming in the prelims examination. So please go through it nicely. Moving on to the next topic. அடுத்த டாபிக் என்னன்னு பார்க்கும்போது சபஹார் ரயில் ப்ராஜெக்ட். So coming to why it's in news, ஏன் நியூஸ்ல இருக்குன்னா, India would have proposed a Chabahar port in Iran. Chabahar port. Actually, this is a agreement between India, Afghanistan, and Iran to build a multilateral transit and transport corridor. In 2016, it was signed where all the three transport systems like rail, sea, and road, all the transport systems will be developed. This was the proposals. So this Chabahar rail project is between Chabahar in Iran and Zahedan bordering Afghanistan. So it's in Iran and this is in the borders of Afghan, and India would have promised to build this. But what would have happened is due to US sanctions on Iran, India would have not taken this project. They would have not financed the project and they would have not laid any stone in starting the project. This would have made Iran to say that Iran would have come out with the thing like, I will go with my project ahead. So, Nana Panikra, I don't want India's support. This would have been the statement of Iran. Though US has given an exemption to this sanction on India to construct the Chabahar project, but India would have been apprehended of USA in this thing. So this was the issue why Chabahar rail project was in news. India would have not laid any stones or financed the project. So Iran would have told like it will start the project, decided to proceed with the project by itself. So basically the IMOU was signed between Indian Railways and Iranian Railways. These were the two things which were involved in signing. So this would have been come up in the year 2016, May 2016. So basically this Chabahar port and the Chabahar infrastructure project is basically to surpass Pakistan so that Indian things can exports or any kind of relationship with the Central Asia can be carried out through this route instead of Pakistan, and also to counter the China factor as China would have built a port in Gwadar in Pakistan. This would have been a problem to India. So this was the reason why to reach Central Asia, India has been searching for some route and this Chabahar port was the option for it. And Chabahar port happens to be a seaport in Gulf of Oman and it is the only oceanic port of the country. So this is the significance of Chabahar port, and this Chabahar port also forms a network in international north-south corridor. So international north-south corridor as well as the it also belongs to the Ashgabat agreement. So this is the thing. So international north-south corridor is between India, Russia, Iran, Europe and Central Asia for transport of goods and services. This is basically for transport of goods and services. All the three rail, road and ship projects would have been, this would have been signed in St. Petersburg in the year 2000. This basically this INSTC was signed in St. Petersburg in the year 2000. So this would, and the agreement would have come into force, signed and the agreement would have come into force in 2002. So formally Turkmenistan was not a member, but now they are planning to become the member into it. So India would have also proposed to include Afghanistan and Uzbekistan so as to expand the scope of the INSTC. This is the thing. So this was signed in 2000. So coming to Ashgabat Agreement, India has also signed the Ashgabat Agreement in the year 2018. India would have joined the Ashgabat in 2018. This was formally introduced in 2011 by countries like Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Oman, Qatar in the year 2000. But Qatar would have withdrawn from the agreement. So India signed it in the year 2018 and came into force in the year, this agreement came into force in the year 2016. This is basically an international multimodal transport between Central Asia and Persian Gulf. All these are basically to surpass Pakistan and reach Central Asia and to counter the China factor. So moving on to the next issue. This is regarding national consultation on review of Beijing Plus 25. So this marks the 25 years of adoption of Beijing Platform for Action. This is basically this Beijing Platform for Action. Also, this one marks the 25th anniversary of 4th World Conference on Women. This is all. These two are the significance of this conference. Basically, this is to bring equality, gender equality, that is equality between men and women. So this is the major view of this major objective of this program. So this Beijing Declaration was adopted in UN on 15th September 1995, so as to bring equality through these 12 critical areas, so basically for women empowerment. So this is the information about this national content consultation on review of Beijing plus 25. And the other things involved in this are, the organization involved in this are basically Ministry of Women and Child Development from the Indian side, then National Commission of Women, this is also basically from India, and UN Women. These are the three bodies which organize this Beijing conference. So coming to global gender index, so global gender gap index by World Economic Forum, India has been ranked 112 out of 153 countries, which is a very bad score for India. In gender gap, they are missing a lot. So as to enhance this gender gap, just to get out of it, India is taking these measures. This is given by WEF. So Namanariya and the Niti Aayog and those organizations are doing a lot of initiatives to empower women, like the initiatives like during pregnancy, they are giving this Pradhan Mantri Matru Vanjana Yojana, like for, as we have seen, it is a cash transfer scheme for compensating the wage loss, then Janani Suraksha Yojana, then Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao for education, National Nutrition Mission to enhance the nutritional things of women. Then they are also bringing entrepreneurship programs for women separately. So there are many schemes which are there to strengthen the lifestyle and empower women at the Indian level. So coming to the next issue, this is regarding the World Wildlife Day 2021. Generally, World Wildlife Day is observed on 3rd March since 2013. This also happens to be the day on which CITES came into force. So 3rd March happens to be this, and this was the day CITES was signed in the year 1973. So CITES is basically an international agreement to regulate the commercial trade in wild animals and plant species, so as to regulate it. This is to conserve, basically conserve the endangered flora and fauna. This is also called as Washington Convention, and the CITES is administered by United Nations Environment Program. And this is a legally binding treaty, that is whatever they come out with, that is legally binding on the signed countries, and its headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. So in this year's World Wildlife Day, India would have, on this occasion, India would have declared that this day is dedicated for reintroduction of cheetah. So Asiatic cheetah, or the Indian the cheetah that was found in India, that would have gone extinct in the year 1952. So at last cheetah was found in Chhattisgarh. The last sighting of cheetah was done in Chhattisgarh. So this Asiatic cheetah happens to be a critically endangered animal. So now India would have come up with a program to introduce African cheetah from Namibia. African cheetahs, basically, these are to introduce cheetah from Namibia into the Naudarehi National Park in Madhya Pradesh. So into Naudarehi National Park, they would have. So from Namibia, the cheetahs were introduced into Naudarehi National Park in Madhya Pradesh. African cheetahs are basically vulnerable species according to IUCN. Why Naudarehi National Park was chosen is that this national park holds the prey system, the prey that cheetah needed, the kind of prey that it has been preyed on, as well as the environment suits the African cheetahs well. So this reintroduction program is coordinated, or it is done by National Tiger Conservation Authority, which is a statutory body under Wildlife Protection Act. This body coordinates, National Tiger Conservation Authority coordinates implementation of Project Tiger and conservation of tigers. And one more information about Asiatic cheetahs is that is at present found only in Iran. So when you are reading about species, if they are critically endangered also, we need to little bit go much deeper into these things, as there are many questions as regarding sites, traffic, and those things which are basically related to protection of endangered species from illegal trade. So in sites, there are three appendix. In appendix 1, the species are protected with high degree of protection is given to the species. So trade in such species or these are basically highly endangered species, and trade in these species are prohibited, and it involves a criminal offense. Then comes the second species, which can be traded for a few very specific purposes. They can be traded like for medicinal purposes and those things. So then comes the third appendix 3, in which there requires a certificate of origin for which the species has to be traded. So certification of origin is required. So these are the things about World Wildlife Day. So let's move on to the next issue. Next issue is regarding right to recall. So right to recall is a tool under direct democracy, but India is a indirect democratic country. So in let's see the definition first. In right to recall, the electorates, that is the people, are given the power to de-elect their representatives through direct votes. That is, if they feel the person who they have elected doesn't hold to what they have promised, the people has the right to remove the particular person who has been elected. So recently in Haryana, there would have been a bill passed by the government which says that right to recall option will be available to Panchayati Raj institutions. So elected members of Panchayati Raj institutions can be removed through right to recall. So coming to direct democracy, basically it's from Greece, and indirect democracy, which is followed in India, is from movements. So in direct democracy, people participate in the government through voting. And there are 4 tools under direct democracy. One is right to recall, in which we de-elect the representative. The electorate de-elects the representative. Second is by referendum. This is kind of public, whatever the issues of public importance, they can be done. Next is initiative. That is, the people can initiate the law which they wanted. So they can pass a bill and such thing. And plebiscite. These are the 4 tools available under direct democracy. So coming to referendum, this is public vote. That is an electorate, whatever the bill or such things are there, the electorate will be asked to vote on it. Through direct votes, the bill will be either considered to be passed or not. For example, Britain exit. This is where the whether to exit from the EU or not was decided by the people. And coming to plebiscite, this is method of obtaining public opinion on some important matters. So important matters, the public opinion is got. So this is regarding direct democracy. Coming to indirect democracy, this is also known as representative democracy, which is followed in India. Here the people participate to vote their representative, and the representative acts as the or delegates the legislation for the people. So this right to recall is not new to India. The concept of Raj Dharma is related to right to recall, and even in the representation of people acts 1951, if the candidature of the or if the legislature is incompetent on certain things, he can be removed. So these are some examples of right to recall. So this is basically to uphold the democracy. So let's go to the next issue. So next issue is regarding tuberculosis. The reason why it has been in use is that annual TB report report has been released by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. At the world level, the WHO releases the global TB report. So there are few things about this annual TB report. It has been given that around 24 lakh TB patients have been notified in the year 2019. This amounts to 14%. Sorry, there has been a mistake. This amounts to 14% increase in TB compared to 2018. So, seeing a few facts about TB, TB is a bacterial disease which is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and it is a treatable and curable disease. If it's addressed at a proper time, this can be cured and treated. But WHO says that in its global TB report, it gives the information that TB forms the largest portion of death, top infectious disease, which top infectious killer disease in the world. Around 4,000 people are dying due to TB each day. And coming to the number, 2/3 of the TB cases are from 3 countries. Among that, India holds the top position. India holds the top position with 27% of TB cases. And then comes China with 9% and Indonesia with 8%. China with 9% and Indonesia with 8%. So this is regarding the global TB report that is given by WHO since 1997, and this also happens to be the annual report given by WHO regarding TB. And there is an initiative in WHO where it says that it is going to end TB by the year 2030. Indian initiative says that India, before this WHO target of 2030, India is going to end TB by the year 2025, which is 5 years ahead of WHO's target. So this there are other programs related to TB called the Nikshay system or Nikshay program. There, the Nikshay system forms the one-stop solution for noting all the TB cases. So here all the TB cases are recorded and monitoring of the TB cases happens here. Monitoring and how the country's performance is in reducing the TB burden. Those things are recorded in this portal. And Nikshay is a platform to eradicate TB. So it's an Nikshay is an information management platform so as to end TB as soon as possible by India. So next comes few information regarding the states' achievements. So coming to the states with who has performed well in TB, the top position goes to Gujarat. Gujarat happens to be a best state in reducing the number of TB burden. Then comes Andhra Pradesh and then Himachal Pradesh. This is in terms of large states. In terms of smaller states, which has a population less than 50 lakhs, this is more than large states are with population of more than 50 lakhs. In smaller states with a population of less than 50 lakhs, the best performing state is Tripura and Nagaland. Coming to Union Territories, Dadar and Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu, which have been merged recently, holds the better position. So these are few information about TB, and diagnosis and other things have been improved much. There are many forms of TB like drug resistant, extremely drug resistant, multi-drug resistant. Multi-drug resistance is with the first line TB courses. Extremely drug resistance is with the then further second line anti-TB drugs. So this happens here. So this is all regarding TB, and the strategy that has been adopted by WHO is called WHO End TB strategy. In this, the WHO promises that it will end TB deaths by 95%, and 95% it will end TB death, and also it cuts 90% of the new cases by the between the years 2015 to 2035. So this is the target that WHO has been set. So, and also it also ensures that due to TB, no family will end up in catastrophic expenses. So it also ensures this. This WHO NGB strategy will also ensure this. So let's go to the next issue. This is regarding Malayan giant squirrel. The reason behind its being in news is that the population of this squirrel is to decline in India by the year 2050 at a rapid pace, and they are also saying that it can even go extinct in India due to the loss of biodiversity and those things which it thrives on. So at present, it seems that the population of this squirrel has reduced by 30%. Actually, India is a home to 3 giant squirrel. One is the Malayan giant squirrel and the other 2 being Indian giant squirrel and grizzled giant squirrel, which are mostly popular in the southern regions of India. So the scientific name of Malayan giant squirrel is Rathufa bicolor. This is the world's largest squirrel species. It has a near threatened status, but in India, due to loss of its biodiversity, its population is decreasing at a rapid pace. This happens to be protected under CITES Appendix 2. As I said, with certain restriction, this species can be traded. Mostly it's found in evergreen and semi-evergreen forest. And under the Wildlife Protection Act, it is preserved under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Acts and CITES its Appendix 2. So this is all about the giant squirrel species. So next, go to the next issue. Regarding one more thing, this observation has been done by Zoological Survey of India. This Zoological Survey of India was established in the year 1916. This is basically to promote survey, that is to get the survey and also explore the biodiversity as well as the information regarding many animal species. So it's a apex organization for animal taxonomy, and this works under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Its headquarters is in Kolkata. So let's go to the next issue. So next issue is regarding the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. So the 16th Pravasi Bharatiya Divas was celebrated this year. So it is basically celebrated on 9th of January every year from 2003. This basically marks the contribution of overseas Indian community in development of India. But recently they would have suggested that since 2015, they would have suggested that this Pravasi Bharatiya Divas will be held every 2 years. And during Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Awards are also given for extraordinary contribution by overseas citizens in India. This is done in the presence of the president. So the Indian diaspora, how they contribute in raising India, their contribution to develop India. So also this year marks the 3rd edition of Bharat Ko Janiye quiz. This is to engage the young overseas Indian between the age of 18 to 35 years and to encourage them to know more about their country of origin. Basically, this is between the age of 18 to 35 to engage the young population. And another one program is Know India program by External Affairs Ministry. This Pravasi Bharatiya Divas is also considered is done by the External Affairs Ministry to know about. It's a 3-week orientation program where the youth, Indian diaspora, that is the youth of Indian overseas Indian citizens community, they are taken to many historic places of India to promote the awareness about their country of origin. So this day is also known as Non-Resident Indian Day, and this is done by the Ministry of External Affairs. The theme for this year is contributing to Atmanirbhar campaign. So why this day has been chosen is that the great Indian diaspora, that is Mahatma Gandhi ji, returned to India from South Africa to get freedom for India, and that's the reason why this day has been chosen as a Pravasi Bharatiya Divas Day. So let's go on to next issue. There are few other initiatives by External Affairs Ministry called the Pravasi Kaushal Vikas Yojana. It's for the skill development scheme for skills to enhance the skill set of immigrant workers. So there are many other programs like this. So just go through it once. So next, go to the next issue. This is Green Agri Project. So this is basically to reduce emission from agriculture and ensure sustainable agriculture practices. This is funded by Global Environmental Facility, and the national coordinating agency of this green agriculture product is DAC and FW, that is Department of Agriculture Cooperation and Farmers Welfare. So the reason why it's being used is that in Mizoram, they have planned to introduce, the union government has planned to introduce this green AG scheme for basically for reducing the carbon dioxide emissions as well, like carbon dioxide sequestration process, in which the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is being captured and it is stored through biological, physical and chemical practices. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is captured and it is stored so that it can be used as many forms of fuel as well. So this is to basically reduce the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, as well as to make use of land and water in a sustainable way. So sustainable land and water use. And also the aim of this scheme is to achieve multiple global environment benefits in at least 1.8 million hectares of land in 5 landscape with mixture of many land use patterns. So the other ministries, other organization which are involved is Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO. Then comes the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Along with Mizoram, this scheme is also to be implemented in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha and Uttarakhand. These are the other areas where this program is going to be initiated. So coming to Global Environmental Facility, this was established on the eve of Rio Earth Summits in the year 1992, where Agenda 21 was also signed. This is for sustainable development. This is the Summit for Sustainable Development. This Global Environmental Facility is the funding mechanism for UNFCCC, United Nations Framework on Climate Change. Then comes the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Chemicals. Then comes the to reduce this persistent organic chemicals. Then comes the Convention on Biological Diversity. Then UNCCD, that is United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Basically, this is to promote afforestation, and the Minamata Convention, which is for mercury, to avoid mercury pollution and those things. So this is an international partnership which has 183 institutions in it. 183 countries, institutions, civil society, and many other things. So let's go on to the next issue and the last issue. This is regarding the Greater Malay Connectivity Project. This project is between Indian Exim Bank of India and the Maldives Finance Ministry. This project holds a total financial corpus of $500 million, in which 400 million is provided as a line of credit. Line of credit in the sense it's a soft loan where the interest charged on this loan is comparatively lesser interest rates, and this loan has to be paid back by the country, and the remaining $100 million is given as a grant, which is it's kind of a gift. It's given as a grant, and this happens to be the largest civilian infrastructure in Maldives. And regarding in this program, this Malay connectivity program, it holds for railways, shipping, as well as that is railways, seaways, as well as roadways. All the three are airways. Everything is included in this. So Maldives happens to be the first neighboring country of India where air bubbles are going to be operationalized. This is for movement of air bubbles are going to be operationalized. This is for basically for movement of people for tourism, medical emergencies, employment, etc. And also there are going to be cargo ferries between India and Maldives. This is also for imports and exports. So this is what is about Malay connectivity project, and this is the largest Indian project. So Maldives follows India's first policy. These are few information regarding Maldives. So Maldives follows India's first policy, and India reciprocates to neighborhood first policy. So India was the first country to recognize Maldives after its independence in the year 1965. So this is all about Maldives, and both the countries have been engaged in SAARC partnership program, which was founded in the year 1985. SAARC was founded in 1985 and its headquarters is in Dhaka, Bangladesh. So this is all for today. So for other exam related updates, follow us regularly on our Telegram as well as YouTube channel. And for any suggestions which are you feel we need to incorporate in this sessions, please feel free, open to us and comment to us. Thank you. Let's meet tomorrow.